The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
We need to have a serious conversation here at the top of the show. And, I get emails, people saying, oh, David, you're shilling for Hillary. How much is the Hillary campaign paying you? Nonsense like this. Obviously, that's ridiculous. I've been super clear. I supported Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primary. Right now, Hillary Clinton is the best choice. We need to keep Donald Trump out of the White House. But there's clearly some kind of major misunderstanding that's going on between me and you in the audience, at least with some people in the audience. And we need to clear it up right now, but really go further and talk pragmatically about what the next 4 years could be, depending on who wins on November 8th. And what made me think of this is, the you're a shill emails, I can sort of easily disregard. It's mostly Hatriots. But last week, there were reasonable live calls and reasonable viewer emails saying, David, what do you like so much about Hillary Clinton? What good things will Hillary Clinton do if she becomes the next president? Let me be incredibly clear right now. Hillary Clinton winning on November 8th is not the victory. Hillary Clinton winning on November 8th is the minimum that we need to prevent worldwide embarrassment and the disaster of a clueless serial sex abuser vulture capitalist from being given the keys to the country, okay? If Hillary Clinton wins, that's when the real work starts, because it will be a rare opportunity. Getting a corporatist Democrat in office is not a progressive victory, right? But having 12 consecutive years of predictable, moderate, center-left Democrats in the White House is an opportunity, because if Hillary Clinton wins, that will be the first period of 12 consecutive years of Democrats in the White House since Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Harry Truman served consecutively from 1933 to 1945. You have to go back not that much less than 100 years to when we had more than 8 years of a Democratic president. If we can defeat Donald Trump, we haven't won yet. We've simply said, now the work can actually start for progressives. And I hope you're ready for it, because Hillary Clinton will be completely predictable, Pat, in what she will do, right? Ostensibly progressive on social issues, moderate on economic issues, with likely some things that we would think of as positive, neoliberal on foreign policy. On November 9th, if Hillary Clinton wins, I don't know what other programs are going to be doing, right, Pat? It'll probably be the launch point for Trump TV, as we've talked about. But on this program, I will celebrate that we finally have a woman president. It's about time. But I'm going to be ready to get to work, because that's the opportunity, not the victory.
And there's even some arguments being made by some progressives that a Trump victory would actually be better for us, because it would cause this sort of like liberal resurgency for the midterms and for 2020. I don't think that's the best way to go at all.
No.
But I think there's some legitimacy there. I think the best way is to just keep the pressure on her and maybe even primary her if need be.
I have no question that this let it all burn down mentality of a Trump presidency will embolden progressives. It may be true to some extent, but the Supreme Court, 3 Supreme Court justices selected by Donald Trump, I still don't think progressives are understanding what that would mean. We're going to talk about the real way that the election is I almost said the wrong thing there. Wow, talk about a Freudian slip. The real way that the election is rigged has everything to do with gerrymandering, and the Supreme Court is related to that. Corporate media is not going to be part of pushing for progressive change. On November 9th, I'm ready to go to work if Hillary Clinton wins. If Donald Trump wins on November 8th, good luck to the U.S. And we'll be here playing defense and trying to stop the insanity, but there will be no real opportunity. If Hillary Clinton wins, it's time to activate. It will be the biggest opportunity in nearly 100 years to move the country significantly to the left. And the circumstances are ripe for change. The country has moved left on many issues if you look at the electorate. As left as ever on abortion, as left as ever on LGBT rights, as left as ever on the problem of income inequality and the way in which corporations have this oligarchical stranglehold on the country. We'll talk about that later, AT&T buying CNN. And a third Democratic presidential term will actually be the possibility of making progressive change to our country, right? The electorate has moved left, but by and large, our politicians have not. We will need independent media to achieve anything. And don't think I'm here cheerleading Hillary Clinton, because by electing her, things are just going to instantly get better, right? Donald Trump suggested this ludicrous notion in the third and final debate where if I get to be president and select Supreme Court justices, automatically Roe v. Wade will be overturned. Things don't happen automatically. That wouldn't happen automatically if Donald Trump gets his way, and Hillary Clinton winning won't automatically make this country more progressive. It's just going to open the door. I'll be working towards it, and hopefully you understand that. Now, in the short term, in the 2 weeks and a day that we have left until this election, we need to keep Donald Trump out. We need to vote in the down ballot races, particularly House and Senate, because that will be a major factor in what can be achieved. Don't email me saying, David, explain to me why you're so thrilled about the possibility of a Hillary Clinton win. It has nothing to do with Hillary Clinton's politics individually. It has everything to do with the fact that if progressives are ready on November 9th, or really in the third week of January when Hillary Clinton will be elected, we've got to go to work, and it will be time to actually say, this is an opportunity we've not had for nearly 100 years. Let's now critique the left from the left. Now, we also have to talk about the House and Senate. We've been devoting a lot of attention to what's going on with the presidential race because it is so important, because of the Supreme Court, because of so much of what it means to have 12 years of consecutive Democratic presidents for the first time in nearly 100 years, dating back to FDR and Harry Truman, the period starting in 1933, as I spoke about at the top of the show. Let's now talk about the importance of a Democratic president versus Democratic control of the Senate and House. If you look at the nearly 8 years of President Obama, you know that President Obama has had to deal with some of the most vile and obstinate Republican obstructionism that we've seen in a very long time. And it's a sort of vicious circle. Republicans obstruct President Obama. President Obama then has to use executive orders to get anything done. And then Republicans slam President Obama for using executive orders, which is necessitated by their own obstructionism. Now, it's still a pretty flaccid critique because President Obama has used fewer executive orders than his predecessors, including Republican predecessors. But as we know, the low information right-wing voters have no idea. If it sounds like a good critique of President Obama, they're going with it. So where are the Senate and House races right now? Let's start with the Senate. Currently, 44 Democrats, 54 Republicans, and 2 independents. Now, the 2 independents, Angus King and this guy named Bernie Sanders, who you may have heard of, both caucus with Democrats. So if we look at the balance of power, it's basically 54 to 46 in favor of Republicans right now. According to Nate Silver's 538.com, the chance of winning control is currently 68.3% for Democrats and 31.7% for Republicans. And if you look at the states here, you'll notice that there are only some states in play here. And as the numbers go, because the vice president breaks ties in the Senate, if Hillary Clinton wins, Democrats need to gain 4 seats to take control. It would make it 50-50. But if there's a tie, Tim Kaine would break the tie, presumably in favor of the Democrats. If Donald Trump wins, Democrats need 5 seats to take control to make it 51-49, since presumably Vice President Mike Pence would not be on the side of Democrats in breaking ties. That's the Senate, okay? Now let's talk about the House of Representatives. And this is where I'm going to talk about a rigged election. Donald Trump has been talking about a rigged election for a long time. Just this morning, I was watching a speech he gave He was meeting with some farmers in Florida. Early voting has begun in many states, including in Florida. Trump is canvassing the state. And Donald Trump was telling them, the polls are rigged. There's bogus polls. In South Carolina, he says he was supposedly losing, and he focused a lot of time there and ended up winning in a landslide, and it's all just completely rigged. Now, this is totally bogus. We've debunked this before. If the election is rigged, it's mostly Republican rigging, as I told you last week. However, there are ways in which one could argue the election is sort of rigged against Democrats, by the way. One, in terms of all races, is voter suppression tactics. We've talked about curtailing early voting hours in Democratic, typically lower income, typically non-white areas. That's something that hurts Democrats and helps Republicans. But we've also talked about gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is strategically drawing congressional districts, House districts that is, in the most recent example after the 2010 census to favor Republicans. So I want to explain to you how rigged it actually is in terms of the House. In 2012, for example, Democrats received just over 50% of the two-party vote, but they won 46% of the seats. Okay, so let me say it in a different way. Won the majority of the popular vote, but won a minority of the seats. And a new Washington Post model says this is on track to happen again in 2016. Now, this is partially gerrymandering, the way the districts are drawn, but it's also partially incumbency bias, Pat. We know that when you have more incumbents, that by definition gives you an advantage. And also the fact that Democratic voters are more concentrated in urban centers. So you will get some big Democratic wins in cities, but you'll still get more districts where Republicans win, where they're more spread out in more rural areas. But gerrymandering it's very fair to say, hey, this election is rigged, but not the way Trump is talking about.
And there's going to be some discrepancy because the average congressional district represents about 700,000 people.
Right.
Some states don't even have that number. But I mean, in 2014, Democrats got 1.3 million more votes than Republicans and still had a loss in the House. So really, there has to be some kind of bipartisan commission, or this has to be settled by the courts. We have to get rid of this whole redistricting done by state legislatures.
The political redistricting is a disaster. And to give you just the numbers before I move on to that, the Republican Party holds a 30-seat majority in the House. And the odds that the Democrats would be able to take that over aren't huge. There are 37 competitive districts remaining. 17 of those are toss-ups, 10 favor Democrats and 10 lean Republican. So it's going to be very, very tough in the House. Now, what about this redistricting, as Pat is talking about, the political redistricting? The most recent redistricting was done after the 2010 census. Every 10 years we have a census. After that, you redistrict. That's the way it's done based on changes in population. Republicans drew 193 House districts by themselves after 2010. Democrats drew 44 House districts after the last census. So what can be done? This is something that progressives can work on during a Hillary Clinton term if we get one. Again, Hillary Clinton winning, not the victory, the opportunity. The next census is in 2020, and then redistricting will be done. Hillary Clinton in the White House won't necessarily change the redistricting process, but it's an opportunity to push for change. It sounds lame, right? It's more like, David, redistricting if Hillary Clinton wins. This is so important. And when I talk to people, I can tell their eyes glaze over and they don't get it, but you have to care about this. You can call your state legislators. You can tell them you want a fair redistricting process. We have now a few years before the 2020 census to demand and propose fair redistricting measures. And additionally, this is why the Supreme Court is so important, right? There's still the potential for partisan gerrymandering to be ruled unconstitutional with 5 Democratic justices, 5 more liberal justices, I guess is the way we should say it since they're officially nonpartisan. It's not outside the realm of possibility that with Hillary Clinton choosing the next couple or 3 Supreme Court justices, that we would actually see this political gerrymandering ruled unconstitutional. One example of what can be done, and Pat alluded to this, California voters passed a law which established an independent bipartisan commission of citizens, and it empowered them to actually solicit voter input and redraw districts. Lawmakers in California in 2010 were stripped of their authority over redistricting, and that is absolutely huge. Now, you would think, wait, well, hold on, let me think about this. Republicans are the party of small government, right? So if politicians don't have to be the ones drawing the districts, that's a duty best left for someone other than politicians. Well, no, Republicans seem to not care about small government when it comes to the process of drawing districts. This is yet another reason we cannot let Donald Trump win and appoint Supreme Court justices. I don't get, Pat, how to get people to care about this. I'm trying so hard. This is so huge, but it is boring, isn't it?
It is boring, but I mean, it's a very important topic because right now we have politicians choosing their constituency, right, where it should be the other way around. We should be voting for them.
No doubt about it. And that's why a lot of them are fighting like hell, Republicans, even if they dislike Trump, because they know that between Trump clearly taking completely fabricated right-wing positions on social issues and gerrymandering and the Supreme Court, that they need to prevent a Hillary Clinton presidency. Yes, I admit Hillary Clinton is not very progressive, but there's a reason that most Republicans, not all as we've talked about, but most Republicans, even though they dislike Trump, are still going to vote for him because they recognize the systemic danger that another Democrat, 12 straight years of Democrats in the White House represents for them. You've got to vote on November 8th. Let's take a break.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is Jerry Gaston. This is viewer and listener supported media. If you like the show, if this is something that you carry around with you on your phone, or you like to check out YouTube clips, or you're watching on TV or listening on the radio, this doesn't just sort of happen, right? This is viewer supported media, and signing up at davidpakman.com/membership is the primary and best way to support the work that we do. Jerry Gaston has done it. Thanks to Jerry. And of course, you can join Jerry. Sign up at davidpakman.com/membership. Another way to support the work that we do is if you ever shop on Amazon.com, the shopping you do can support us if before shopping you visit davidpakman.com/Amazon. Now, here's something interesting. We don't get any personal info about who buys through our Amazon link. We just get a list of items each day of stuff that was purchased. And in the last week, a bunch of Samsung Galaxy Note 7 accessories were purchased, which is interesting because Samsung has taken the Galaxy Note 7 off the market. I saw videos of this thing spontaneously catching fire. There's an unbelievable video of a table inside of a fast food restaurant. I don't know if you've seen this, Pat. And there's a Samsung Galaxy Note 7 sitting on the table, and it's just smoking. I mean, it's spontaneously catching fire. And a kitchen employee comes over with kitchen mitts that are probably used when you're deep frying fries at a McDonald's or something. And they pick up the Note 7 and it's smoking. I mean, it's just black smoke, and they toss it outside. I was recently on this flight to Vegas, and they now make an announcement. Put your seatbelt on. When we tell you to turn off your phone, turn it off. Laptops are allowed above 10,000 feet. And Samsung Galaxy Note 7s are not allowed on the plane, period. It's the first time I've ever seen a specific device not allowed. Disaster for Samsung.
Well, yeah, at the restaurant, I bet it looked like they were serving fajitas or something.
Yeah.
This really couldn't have happened at a worse time because now Google's coming out with their Pixel product. I mean, right. This has cost them about $10 billion so far.
And I am a Samsung Galaxy 7 user. I absolutely love the phone. It's fantastic. It's terrific. I'm finally winning again with this thing. Believe me, trust me, it's fantastic. But the Galaxy Note 7, not good. So I'm wondering who in our audience is ordering accessories for their Note 7 when you're not even really supposed to have it anymore because it could catch fire at any time.
Yeah, it's probably pretty cheap right now, I would imagine.
Good time to pick up accessories, I guess. All right, remember, if you ever shop on Amazon, davidpakman.com/Amazon will redirect you and send us about a 7 or 8% kickback from everything you buy. Okay, I have a few very compelling and titillating announcements related to the show that I want to make. One is related to this picture that is over my shoulder, and I'll talk about that last because I know people are interested in that. Number one, internships available here in our Boston studio. We have some new initiatives that we are launching and that we're sort of going to be testing. And we always have opportunities for interns to work in our Boston studio. So if you're in the Boston area and you can commit to 2 days a week in our studio is all that we ask for, you won't be getting coffee. You'll be doing actual work. You'll be managing video distribution. You will be working on projects. You will be working on segments. You will be working on all sorts of interesting stuff, working with advertisers, planning future shows. It's fast-paced. You will learn a lot. And that's really it. If you're interested, you can get in touch through the website email at the website contact form rather at davidpakman.com. Write in about your interest in participating in the show, and then we'll email back and ask for a resume, etc. That is number one. Big announcement, internships, get in touch. Number two, we are developing David Pakman Show coffee. David Pakman Show coffee will be available soon, along with the return of David Pakman Show t-shirts and hoodies and bumper stickers. We've been rebuilding the store on the new davidpakman.com website. That's why t-shirts have not been available for a little while. And with that, we are going to bring in 2 roasts. One is going to be a David Pakman Show espresso roast for espresso machines. The other is going to be a drip coffee roast for regular coffee pots or Chemex or French press or whatever you use. Please help us come up with interesting names for these 2 roasts. We need 2 names. Our audience came up with the term Hatriot Mail and so many other of the terms and phrases and names for stuff on the show. So please email them in, post in the comments. If you're watching this as a YouTube video, you can tweet me at dpakman. And we've also created a thread on our Reddit discussion forum for suggestions on the coffee roast names. And with no further delay, the 2017 David Pakman Show calendar is coming. Let me show you first the cover. The cover was designed by David Pakman Show viewer Dan Burke. The cover is a fantastic cartoon of me basically as the boxing ref between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. You see Obama in the background. You see Jeb Bush and so many people. And the entire calendar is comic book, coloring book themed. So I'll show you just part of one comic now. Every month has its own comic or comics. These were all designed by Dan Burke. If you want to think about this as an adult coloring book, as you can see if you're watching with me, this would be a pretty cool coloring book. If you just want to put it up on your wall, then it is going to be what I call a conversation starter calendar. And the themes vary. Lewis is in some of these comics. Rachel is in some of these. I mentioned this on the bonus show last week. Unfortunately, Pat is not in any of the comics because he started after the comics were done. But I've told Pat that there is no question Dan is going to start including him in upcoming comics. And you're not furious about this, right, Pat?
Yeah, I mean, it is too bad, but I'm looking forward to see how I'm going to be caricaturized in the next edition.
Yeah, the caricatures and the comics are really, really good. So the 2017 comic book style calendar, it will go on sale soon. More details about that later in the week. Chaos in Venezuela, where supply shortages have been running rampant. Inflation is of the highest in the world. Yesterday, the Venezuelan Congress declared that President Nicholas Maduro's government has staged a coup by blocking a drive to recall the president in a legislative session, which was interrupted when his supporters stormed the congressional chamber. Now, opposition lawmakers vowed to put Maduro on trial after a court, I guess you can call it friendly to the Maduro administration, on Thursday suspended their campaign to collect signatures to hold a referendum on removing the very unpopular president. Lawmaker Julio Borges said that the opposition-led Congress is now in open rebellion after a majority of its members voted that the decision constituted a coup with government participation. Huge shortages of all sorts of supplies in Venezuela. some of the world's highest inflation. Some polls say nearly 80% of voters want Nicholas Maduro out. And Venezuela's constitution allows the current opposition to call for a referendum to revoke the president from the government. There's actually a lot written about this online. Basically, there are 3 stages to call for a referendum in Venezuela. First, the opposition has to collect at least 1% of signatures from registered voters in the whole country. After that, the Electoral Council has to validate the signatures. The opposition, again, has to collect 20% of signatures from registered voters in a national context. This is insane. After CNE, the Electoral Council, validates those signatures, they must actually call for the referendum. Now, after the opposition collected that 1% of signatures, and you can imagine if 80% of the country's voters really want Maduro out, you're going to easily be able to get 1% of the signatures of the country's registered voters. They started the process to collect that second group of signatures, and then this decree was made that it has to be regional. So instead of being just 20% of the whole country, you need 20% in each of the 23 Venezuelan states. This is not only much more difficult to achieve, but it is being argued by the opposition completely unconstitutional. So now there's a push to take legal action. The country is descending into even further chaos. And this is part of the problem that I've been talking about in Venezuela for a very long time. Not only is there no press freedom in Venezuela, there is no judicial freedom. The court system is completely controlled by the government, by the administration. There's a recent Planet Money about why Venezuela has imploded. I would encourage you to check it out. It's a very good episode. And you know, when Hugo Chavez passed, I was very clear that I did not see Hugo Chavez as the big progressive populist savior that some progressives in the US saw him as. And people went nuts on me. I actually had people, Pat, you wouldn't know this because you weren't with the show at the time. My commentary on Venezuela actually led to some members writing to me saying, David, you're not progressive because you criticized Hugo Chavez. You have a government in Venezuela that arms and sponsors gangs to deal with issues extrajudicially. You have total control, total corruption of the court system. The media system is an absolute and total joke. And every time I would talk about it, in talking about Hugo Chavez and in talking about Nicholas Maduro, some portion of our audience would email in, they would leave voicemail saying, David, we really don't like you. My wife and I, my buddy and I'm listening to the show. I'm so angry. Just because you see populist rhetoric doesn't mean it's truly for the people. Just because a movement or a government or a country's regime, administration is ostensibly left, that doesn't mean that it's actually progressive. And there's no better example than what we've seen in Venezuela. This is relatively common in Argentina. This is something growing up, being from Argentina and growing up around political discussion about South America, this is something I am very, very familiar with. And if people want to get mad at me because I don't see the Chavez and now Maduro line as progressive, I see them as strong-arm authoritarians with sort of populist rhetoric. If that really angers you, then I would encourage you to research a little more. I am just the messenger, ladies and gentlemen. Venezuela descending into chaos, completely unsurprising to anybody who's been following it. We will continue to follow it and tell you what ultimately happens.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I'm joined today by Chris Roser, who is a professor of production management, Toyota and McKinsey alumni, and interested in the past, present, and future of manufacturing. He writes on his blog allaboutlean.com, and he just published a book called Faster, Better, Cheaper on the history of manufacturing. So, Chris, I want to jump right in because there's so much to talk about. First, Let's talk a little bit about your field in the context of the presidential election that we have here in the U.S. We've heard to varying degrees from Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump claims about bringing jobs back, manufacturing jobs from other countries, including China and Mexico. Of course, Donald Trump having sent some of these jobs to those countries to begin with, but we'll ignore that for the time being. My critique has been many of these jobs no longer exist due to technology, and neither candidate is really talking about that. How big of an issue is technology and automation in the field of manufacturing right now?
It's a very big issue. The work will come back, but not the jobs. Eventually, when we have the automation and the robots to do all the work automated, then of course East Asia and other far countries have no longer a labor cost advantage, so you can manufacture in America too. But it won't be with people, it will be mostly with robots.
And very often when we think about manufacturing and automation, people's minds go to factories with robots instead of people. But there's a sort of further question that I want to explore with you, which is what about the pre-manufacturing portion, which is the engineering part, right? I think for many people, it's harder to imagine that the engineering part will be automated, but is that also in the future?
I believe yes. Of course, at that point, we're talking about opinions, not facts, because it's the future. But I believe in the future, it will also be possible to automate more complex and cognitive demanding tasks like engineering. To me, the human brain is a connection of neurons and signals, and it's nothing that cannot be simulated or modeled with a computer if the computer will be powerful enough. Right now, it's not yet. But in the coming decades, I believe it will. About when exactly, people have different opinions. Some researchers say in 20 years, others say in 100 years. Again, some others say never. But I believe at one point, the computer will be able to do pretty much everything better than we do.
There are some tools online that have started to pop up which say, enter your job and we'll tell you how likely it is to be automated or replaced by a machine or a robot or AI in the future. Within the broader areas of manufacturing, what are the least automatable jobs in your estimation?
The least automatable jobs are probably the jobs where the customer puts value on interaction with humans. If the customer pays not for a product, but for something to talk to a human being, that's a job which will probably remain non-automated for longer. And of course, right now, many jobs which we have with talking with human beings, they can be automated. And it already are, like call centers and stuff like that is already heavily automated. But if you go, for example, to a psychologist or something, I'm not sure if a computer would give the same feeling as a machine. But then maybe I'm wrong.
Can we expect significant changes to more environmentally conscious or sustainable manufacturing anytime soon? And I'd also just want to broadly ask you, what would that even mean to have more sustainable manufacturing, particularly when we think about the Industrial Revolution being at the sort of center of human-caused climate change on the planet? What would it even mean to move towards environmentally sustainable manufacturing?
When you say sustainable manufacturing, there are actually three things that need to be sustainable. One is the environment, the second one is the relations with the people, and the third one is the finances of the company. And in most cases, many companies are already squeezed financially, so they'll do environmentally what is necessary. They'll do what will, in the long run, save them money. But few companies are doing it just out of the good of their hearts. There are some, but for many companies, it's just a cost-value analysis to see where to put in money to save the environment, where they're forced to by law. And if they do it voluntarily, they probably often they spend more money on advertising their good deeds than on the good deed itself.
So if we were to, I'll get into some more specific questions in a second, but if we were to say subsidies aside and sort of government incentives aside, generally speaking, in the world of manufacturing, is more sustainable manufacturing more expensive typically?
That's a good question. It can balance out to plus minus zero. It depends on the exact case. In some cases, when it actually saves money, they've done it long ago. Like car makers, they save every piece of scrap of metal and melt it down to recycle it because it just makes sense money-wise. So in that aspect, sustainability is already good business sense, and most people wouldn't really call it ecologically friendly because it's just done anyway because it saves money. But other things that cost more money are things which companies are more hesitant. And I believe it's a task of politics and the customers and the population in general to put pressure or to motivate those companies to become more environmentally friendly.
Right, because very often when we think in the US, I mean, I think the carbon tax is sort of an example where people say the only way to really incentivize more environmentally friendly behavior is to artificially make it more expensive to be economically or environmentally unfriendly, so to speak. Now, what the critics of that idea say is you're not considering the costs of the negative externalities of the unenvironmentally friendly or environmentally unfriendly actions. And I'm wondering, I mean, is this even something that we can really fine tune and deduce specifically from a financial standpoint? Can we really measure the negative externalities of manufacturing in an objective way, or will there always be disagreement about exactly what the financial value there is?
As it's difficult to measure the financial value and the cost. And also, whenever you put an external influence or external nudging on it, companies also try to avoid it or try to find a way out of it. And I'm not even talking about Volkswagen and Dieselgate, that's a particular case, but imagine you're a company and you're into logging and you're kind of putting new forests, seeding new forests. You would have done this anyway, but nowadays you probably make a little bit money on the side by selling it as a new tree as carbon friendly. Even so, it may not grow that many additional trees, but only it looks better for the company which buys the carbon rights from the trees that one company is planting.
Interesting. Last thing I want to touch on a little bit. I've read a few articles, and they're admittedly not backed by the most precise and extensive sort of data, but there have been a few articles I've read which suggest that for the US specifically, the move towards automation and robotics and artificial intelligence may actually be good in the sense that, and you sort of alluded to this at the beginning when you said, when it's the machines doing the work, it's no longer drastically cheaper to have the machines do the work overseas than in the United States. And that there's a possibility, and I have no idea whether the numbers actually bear this out. There's a possibility that if you move all of the work back to machines in the US rather than people in Asia and other parts of the world, that you might actually bring some ancillary jobs back to the United States. The maintenance of the machines, for example. Maybe some more of the engineering would be brought in-house, or some more money would be freed up for engineering and creative jobs because the machines are now doing the work. Is there anything to that idea, or is it really sort of unreasonable?
It's really hard to get solid and reliable data about those kind of things. Most models are a little bit more than a wild guess and an estimate, but I believe in the medium term, it will increase the participation of the workers, or it will provide more jobs for exactly the people you mentioned, for the people who maintain, install, and build the robots. There will be more jobs for them in the medium term. Until, of course, in the long run, maybe 50 or 100 years, they may get automated too. But in the medium term, I think it will bring jobs back to America, which otherwise would have never come back.
Absolutely fascinating. I will remind you, the book is Faster, Better, Cheaper. We've been speaking with the book's author, Chris Roser, who is a professor of production management. Thanks so much for talking to us about this.
Thanks, David.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
If you are concerned about the problem of narrow range of ideas in media in the United States with too few owners and the horrific consolidation that we've seen over the last 15 or 20 years, it is about to get a lot worse. An oligarchy is when a small group of people has control of either a country or an organization or an industry or an institution. And today I need to talk to you about the institution of news media in the United States. You might remember that Comcast bought MSNBC Universal, which includes MSNBC, meaning Comcast owns MSNBC, one of the few cable news channels. And now we have learned over the weekend that AT&T is going to buy CNN and more because they've actually reached a deal to acquire Time Warner for more than $80 billion. If this is successful, it's still an if, but it appears to be moving forward, at least for now, AT&T would gain control of some major brands, including HBO, including Warner Brothers Entertainment, and CNN. Last year, AT&T already acquired DirecTV for $48.5 billion. I cannot possibly overstate the importance of this. Now, you might say, David, I don't care about news media. I don't watch TV. I care about the environment and climate change. You cannot separate the two. Public willingness to commit money and resources to fighting climate change depends on what people know or think they know about climate change, which is informed by what? Corporate media. And what is corporate media influenced by? The huge amount of advertiser money that pours in, and of course, media being mostly run by a few large corporations. If you care about income inequality, public motivation to pass laws to reduce inequality depends on what people think about income inequality. If people don't understand why it's bad for our economy and society to have a high degree of income inequality, why would they care to change it? And of course, corporate media is not explaining to people why income inequality is bad. So if your reaction is, let media do whatever they want, I'm not living in the news media world, here's my issue. Whatever your issue is, it is dictated by media coverage of the issue and how media is owned and funded. No matter what issue you care about, Pat, this story is the stuff of nightmares.
I was actually watching some CNN, and of course, they were kind of reluctant to speak on this merger.
Yeah.
It was Brian Steltzer's Reliable Sources, and he spent about 5 minutes talking about this. And he said that CNN would keep their journalistic integrity. But does anyone really believe that? I mean, they're just going to negate certain stories if it has any conflict of interest with their sponsors.
Yeah, and you know, sometimes you'll see that media will cover a story about their parent company, and they'll say, in the interest of disclosure, X company is the parent company of this network, and then they go on to talk about the story in whatever terms. But the total narrowing of what issues are even acceptable is only going to get worse with this. And internet service providers have expanded their holdings. They find themselves, when an internet service provider buys content creators, all of a sudden they're competing with companies like Netflix, for example. And you can see the obvious incentive that it would create. For example, AT&T buys HBO. They want people to subscribe to HBO rather than Netflix because AT&T would make money by people subscribing to HBO. So they can make changes to their internet service, for example, to make HBO more preferable to Netflix. Maybe Netflix doesn't stream as well, for example. The idea would be that net neutrality would prevent all of this from happening. But when you have total what's called vertical integration, that you own the entire means of production and distribution, it is very difficult for government to effectively police that. And beyond that, it's more of a concern when you think about the manufacturing of public opinion that's able to be done by so few companies. You've got to wake up, right? This is something, again, where with President Trump, we have no chance. Pro-corporate Supreme Court justices, lawsuits against media, which Donald Trump has said he would do, that is very different than center-left, center-right Hillary Clinton appointing some relatively center-left or left Supreme Court justices. With Hillary, there's no automatic improvement, but it's likely not going to get worse. And maybe we can do something about it as consumers. Comcast controls MSNBC, AT&T on the verge of controlling CNN. Welcome to the future of media. And I know for many in our audience, I don't have to paint the picture this clearly, but you have to support independent media, right? I mean, I know it's tough, but you need to choose to go the other way and do things like being a member of our show. We're talking about pennies a day here, okay? And you're seeing what's happening. I've been telling you about media consolidation for years. I've been telling you about the narrow source of media stories and saying we have to support independent media. If it's not this show, support some other show. We've got to do it. And you can use coupon code HATRIOT40, that's HATRIOT 40, when you sign up for membership at davidpakman.com/membership to get a discount. I don't care how much you pay. We need buy-in because this is the stuff of nightmares that we are seeing. It's a string now with Donald Trump's sexual assault accusers of 10, 15, 17, I don't even know how many. But this weekend gave us maybe the most outrageous accusation yet, which effectively amounts to Donald Trump soliciting prostitution, allegedly offering a porn star money for sex. I'm talking about porn actress Jessica Drake, who claims that Donald Trump attempted to come on to her during a 2006 golf tournament in Lake Tahoe, California. Trump has, of course, denied the allegations. He said he'd never met Jessica Drake. Unfortunately, we're showing you a picture of Donald Trump with Jessica Drake. Trump was married to his third wife, Melania, when he and Drake, who is now 42 years old, met before Donald Trump teed off at this golf tournament. And Trump, as the story goes, allegedly started flirting with Drake immediately, asked her for her phone number, invited her to his penthouse hotel suite. And Drake says she was a little bit skittish, so she brought two female friends with her, and that Trump aggressively greeted them in his pajamas, grabbed each of them, and forcibly kissed all of them on the lips without asking for permission. Exact story that countless other women have told. The three women left after Trump inquired about Drake's relationship status and her sort of experiences as an adult film star. And later, a staffer of Donald Trump reportedly called Jessica Drake to invite her back, saying reportedly, "What do you want? How much?" She declined. And then a second phone call came with an actual cash offer. Jessica Drake saying, "I received another call from Donald or a male calling on his behalf offering me $10,000. I declined once again, saying I had to go back to LA for work." And then here's where Trump really tried to sweeten the deal, Pat, saying, "If you've got to get back to LA for work, come over. I'll give you the $10K for sex, and then my private plane will fly you back." Quite the ladies' man, this Donald Trump, huh?
Yeah, and this really adds a whole nother layer, too, to the sexual assault allegations.
Yeah.
Because if you remember what took Elliot Spitzer down, it wasn't so much infidelity as it was that he was hiring prostitutes, right? And I wouldn't be surprised if more women of the night come forward against Trump here.
Trump does everything big league, right? Jessica Drake, not just a porn star, but an award-winning porn star. And I wonder, I'm just throwing it out there, how long will it be until someone comes forward saying Trump paid to have me get an abortion? And if it happened, you know what Trump would say? Hey, that's because I'm smart. It was legal. I take advantage of what's legal. Hillary was a senator. Why didn't she make abortion illegal? Trump will make paying for sex great again. And clearly he attempted that. According to Jessica Drake, it didn't happen. 2 weeks and a day before the election, more than a dozen sexual assault accusations against Donald Trump, and his supporters don't seem to care, as they don't seem to care if he lies in every single debate, many, many times more than Hillary Clinton, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times as much as Hillary Clinton. And as Trump famously said, he could shoot people on Fifth Avenue. Many of his supporters wouldn't care. I think Trump was actually right about that. We have a voicemail number, and that number is 219-2-DAVID-P. Call anytime. Take a listen to this voicemail.
Hey, David, this is Ken from Southern California. Wow, Alex Jones is just whacked out dude, man. So this dude actually believes that Sandy Hook was basically a hoax staged by the federal government. He believes that the federal government is, and I don't believe this, is putting chemicals in the water to turn our children gay.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes on to say, I don't want them putting chemicals in the water that turns the frogs gay. What the is wrong with this dude? Wow, wow, wow. Thanks, David. Bye.
I love this. I'm so desensitized to the insanity of Alex Jones that when I hear something like this, it's so nice to hear from someone who is actually reacting, Pat, to the shock of what Alex Jones says, because I'm completely desensitized to it.
Yeah, and I mean, at this point, this guy has no legitimacy at all to any of the claims that he makes. And if he was to make a valid point whatsoever, you could respond with, well, you think that they're trying to make the frogs gay.
Yeah, I love the wide-eyed naivete of Ken from California. On the bonus show today, I've got some great stories from Las Vegas. I will give you an update on the 2017 David Pakman Show calendar. I will give you an update as to what's going on with the David Pakman Show coffee beans and so much other stuff. DavidPakman.com/membership. Coupon code Patriot40.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.